Blessed to be part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning here at KIDO Talk Radio. We'll be joined in studio coming up by Mark Meckler, the founder of the Tea Party Patriots movement. He is in the state of Idaho to talk about the Constitutional Convention, the CONCON. And we will take your calls on that, whether or not you believe that this would be a good thing at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. In addition to that, other things going on. Apple saying that they're going to bring in billions of dollars. That's going to be a boom to the economy. You know, we haven't seen this in quite some time. And then you have the looming specter of a government shutdown.
He wants to ensure that he has his immigration priorities in there, and that is border security. That is ending chain migration, ending the diversity visa lottery system. I mean, it's very clear that the president wants to move forward on a DACA deal and securing the border, but it's got to be with ensuring that we don't recreate a second DACA situation. As we're seeing already, border crossings have increased. Our ICE agents are not empowered. They don't have the opportunity to remove individuals coming in. This is a crisis. This is an ongoing problem, and the president will continue to do what he can to protect American citizens.
And there we have it, this crisis. So it really comes down to whether or not you believe that the president of the United States and the Republican Party will be responsible for this government shutdown. I love how the Democrats are saying, well, you don't have our fingerprints on it, so then why do you run for office if you're not going to be part of the solution? You're just going to be part of the problem. More on that in a minute. This is from Mr. B. Kevin Miller, get rid of all your regular cronies on your program. It's getting boring. Liberal Steve, Tea Party Bob, and Liberty Linda, all the regular calling people that have nothing better to do. It's getting old, Kevin. Wow. Sounds like people in this building sometimes. Well, Mr. B, we appreciate your opinion. We don't agree with it, but we appreciate it. This program, it's here for the folks. The regulars that call in, we call them our contributors. We appreciate that, but we do appreciate you listening at 580-5436. 580-KIDO. So back to this government shutdown. And here's, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there, would anybody miss it? So if the government would shut down, would anybody really miss it? And now we're hearing that, the military could get in trouble for this. They don't have the readiness, and this is coming from Republican Paul Ryan. I just have to say, where's the principle here? And people say that Donald Trump's not a Republican, but he's the only one that is trying to keep his promise to build the wall. If there's no wall, there's no deal.
North Korea is working to build ballistic missiles capable of hitting the continental United States. Iran is marching forward with its request for regional hegemony by backing terrorism across the globe.
There we have it. Pugnacious Paul Ryan.
I'm optimistic we're going to get there. But we cannot allow this vital primary work to be layered into or minimized as Washington melodrama. And that's our big problem right now.
Chris in Meridian with Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Chris.
Hey, good morning, Kevin. Yeah, I like Liberty Linda. When she calls in and says what's on her mind, it's usually a well-formed opinion. The other guy, I forgot his name, what's Steve or something?
Liberal Steve, yes.
Liberal Steve, yeah, he's all right, but Linda's good. Hey, on another note, I'm kind of concerned about CNN with their own doctor saying that, they're predicting that Trump has heart disease. This might sound kind of strange, but I almost wonder if it's like a setup in a way, because believe it or not, heart attacks can be arranged. I mean, they've had that in the 70s where the CIA can shoot a little frozen dart into somebody and it has all the signs of a heart attack without any really traces to it. And that sounds kind of extreme, but we live in a very crazy time. They've tried so many different things to get Trump out of office. I'm worried that they might get really, really desperate. So just keep that in mind.
Well, Chris, I appreciate that, and we'll throw that out to everybody listening right now. KIDO Talk Radio.
All right, thanks.
Thanks. I think what Chris is talking about here is the comments of Sanjay Gupta, Now, Sanjay Gupta is a doctor, and he's affiliated with CNN. And Sanjay Gupta does some radio. And really to have somebody on your particular radio station or show, you have to agree with the comments of Sanjay Gupta. We have Fox News here. We carry the banner proudly of having Fox News here in the Treasure Valley. Other folks, you've got the publicly funded radio stations as well. They do a nice job of giving you the progressive side. And, unfortunately, I don't think that we should be funding them or paying for them. And it's funny because these publicly funded places, they still ask for money even though they get money from the taxpayers, which is absurd. If we don't succeed here, we're out of jobs. But in publicly funded radio, which is not objective, it's crazy that they beg for money and they still take our tax dollars, number one. Number two, you have people that agree with Sanjay Gupta. If you don't know the story, Sanjay Gupta, who is on the radio in the Treasure Valley, Sanjay Gupta made this up that he believes that Donald Trump is suffering from heart disease. Never mind that you have a rear admiral that was appointed by Barack Obama give the president a clear bill of physical health, mental health, and I don't know about the spiritual health, but you have people debating that. So then you have Sanjay Gupta, not Dr. Oz, not Dr. Phil, a progressive, a liberal, a physician, making this up. How in the world can a physician say that Trump has heart disease if they've never examined them? It is Trump derangement syndrome all over again and again and again. And I believe that people should be made aware of what you're hearing, the sources you're hearing them from. Again, we don't back down. We proudly support Fox News. And it's an honor to be associated with them. It's an honor to be associated with Glenn Beck, Sean Hannity, Dave Ramsey, Lars Larson. But when Sanjay Gupta is on, then you can't help but think that Sanjay Gupta making things up about the president reflects the values. Think about that the next time you hear Sanjay and his made-up stories. And that's my opinion. 5-8, how many of us have been to doctor's offices? And when you go into the doctor's office, when you go into the hospitals, they read your blood pressure. They take your temperature. They listen to your heart. How in the world can you say that Donald Trump has he's got a bad diet. He doesn't sleep. Genetics, as we discussed. But when you have the media coverage, 95% negative in the world that we live in today, what's next? You have Chris and Meridian saying, hey, Kevin Miller, I'm worried about the president's health. I would agree. What are they going to make up next? By the way, again, if you're just tuning in, we had an email from Mr. B saying it's time to get rid of the regular contributors. I don't know what this show would be without Liberty Linda or Tea Party Bob or even Liberal Steve. And, we've had internal conversations here. Well, you need to be like sassy and frassy. No, this show is about the values here in the Treasure Valley. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Don't forget, coming up, Mark Meckler. I believe he's outside. I hear some people actually talking outside our studio. If not, maybe it's just people in the broadcast center. But Mark Meckler will be joining us. He is the founder of the Tea Party Patriots, talking about the Constitutional Convention. And many people believe that this is the way to go, where you have a convention of states and they rewrite the... He is? Okay, come on in. Where you rewrite the Constitution. So we'll talk to Mark. By the way, he's here. You can have a seat here, sir. I actually heard the conversation going on. I go, it's either the loud people on the decadent, deplorable music stations or Mr. Meckler's joining us now. We've had him on the phone before, and he joins us in studio. Good morning, sir. Welcome to KIDO Talk Radio.
Good morning. Great to be with you. Sorry to be one of the loud people.
Well, at least you have something to say.
Always.
So what brings you to Idaho?
The Convention of States project, it's being considered in the legislature. This is a chance for folks in Idaho to step up and join the movement to restrain the federal government. So we're here to promote that and talk to legislators.
When you take a look at this, many people believe that if you do this, this is like opening up Pandora's box. And before we get to that, and we'll take some calls at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. How would that work? When you talk to the legislators, how would this all work, sir?
You mean how does it flow structurally?
Yes. How would this convention of states happen?
Right. So basically, here's how it works. It's in Article 5 of the Constitution. It's the second clause of Article 5. It's important to know historically how it came to be. At the convention, 2 days before the end of the convention in 1787, Colonel George Mason from Virginia stands. He addresses the assembly. He said, "We've made a terrible mistake. We drafted a constitution that gives Congress the power to propose amendments should they deem them necessary. But we failed to give that same power to the people in the states." And he asked a question which I think, Kevin, still resonates today. He said, "Are we so naive that we believe that a federal government that becomes a tyranny will restrain its own tyranny?" Right? And I see you laugh.
No, I'm agreeing.
Yeah. I think they laughed. I mean, we don't have video of that. Obviously, there was no Facebook or YouTube.
Right.
But I think they all laughed. And here's how we know they actually laughed. Because Madison's notes at that point actually say something really interesting. Two small Latin words, nin com, which means no comment or no debate. They debated everything in that convention. They didn't debate this. They put the second clause of Article 5 in to give the states the power to restrain the federal government. So that's how the whole thing starts. The way it works is it takes 2/3 of the state legislatures to make a call. The call has to be the same, or the resolution in every state legislature. That's 34 states. So far, 12 states have passed the call for this convention, and we're quickly on our way to the 34.
What about the idea of opening up Pandora's box? Culturally, we are such a different nation than we were in the creation of the republic.
I mean, so there's two separate things I want to address there. One is, are we really that different? And I would argue we're not as different as we like to think we are. If you look back to the nation at that point, it was very divided. People in the various states around the country, the 13 states, really disliked each other. They were divided along religious lines, not cultural lines as we were. The culture was similar, but the religions were very different. And they really had disdain for each other. There was a lot of dislike among members of the convention itself. There were very self-serving people in that convention that were there to make money, to secure land interests. I mean, what we know about are the guys who rose above the fray. Those people exist in every legislature around the country today, in Washington, D.C., but they were just regular people in that convention. I think it's important that we understand those were just regular human beings in the convention. So that's number one. I don't think we're all that different, and I think it's important when we look back through the filter of history that we don't purify everything. As far as whether it can, quote-unquote, open Pandora's box and run away, and the question is, I would always ask, where's that argument come from? This is really important. Like, if you're making an argument, you need to know what's the basis for that argument. Who first made that argument? Who put that argument into the American debate? And the answer in this case is the radical left. That's the argument of the radical left. Here's where it came from. 1973, we get Roe versus Wade. States immediately do what they're supposed to do if they don't like it. They begin passing Article 5 applications to overturn Roe versus Wade. It's a much more conservative country in 73. People are outraged by Roe versus Wade. And what happens is, at some point, Phyllis Schlafly, who, God rest her soul, a great American hero, a great conservative, writes a letter to Chief Justice Warren Burger, the Chief Justice who gives us Roe versus Wade, and asks him the question, what do you think about this convention idea? Now, remember, this is the seminal decision of his court.
Right.
She is talking about a convention to overturn that decision. What do you think he would say, Kevin? Great idea, Phyllis. Why don't you flip my court and, reverse? No, he says this is outrageous and this could lead to a runaway convention. The actual term runaway convention comes from Warren Burger. This is where it comes from. A leftist, activist, liberal jurist. They then go out, and this is all documented on our website. This is not hearsay. This is actually, there's documentation for this. They go out and they recruit professors from Yale and Harvard to start writing essays about the runaway convention. And the reason is this, and they wrote about it. They are afraid that this is a tool conservatives can use to reverse, at that point, 75 years of ultimate progressivism. 1973, big government reigned supreme. And so they realize that Article 5 is the last tool left to conservatives. And they actually write, we have to stop them from using Article 5. So people who posit the runaway convention argument are using the argument of leftists. And let me bring it to the modern day. And finish this off for you.
I didn't know I was a leftist, but okay.
And you're not a leftist, but you are using leftist progress.
Okay.
And here, now I will absolutely prove it to you in the modern era. We'll come from 1973, we'll come to 2017.
Sure.
Good Friday, 2017. There's a press release issued by Common Cause, which is George Soros's main policy arm, joined by Center on Budget and Policy Priority, another Soros policy shop, and signed by 230 leftist groups. Kevin, this is every leftist group you've ever heard of. I would challenge you to name one that's not on there. It is the Communist Party of America, Socialist Party of America, Daily Cause, MoveOn.org, SEIU, AFL-CIO, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can't name a radical left. Planned Parenthood's on there, La Raza's on there, all against the Convention of States. So the question people have to ask themselves if they're against this is, if they're conservatives like you and me, George Soros, all those groups, why are they staying? And let me add one more piece, which will be the frosting on the cake, or might make you throw up, one or the other, I'm not sure which. Here's the frosting on the cake. On Hillary's book tour, the dismal failure that it was, she started attacking the Convention of States project, saying that we were trying to reverse 115 years of progressivism. Guess what? She's right. So the question people have to ask themselves if they bought into all this runaway convention stuff is, why are they now standing with all those people? They probably don't know that they are. But if they know that they are, they got to ask that question.
More coming up. Mark Meckler's here, Citizens for Self-Governance, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. We'll talk about the Convention of States. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Mark Meckler joining us in studio. By the way, thank you for what you have done and what you've done in the past with Tea Party Patriots. Let me ask you, sir, before we get back to the Convention of States and some Idaho lawmakers that you'll be meeting with this week and today that support it, and again, we'll take your calls at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Where is the whole Tea Party movement now? What's the state of activism and conservatism today?
I love that question, and you actually phrase it in a fair way. Usually the way I'm asked that question in the media is the Tea Party's dead, what happened? And that's not the case. Here's what happened. The Tea Party did what any movement should do if it's successful. A successful political movement ultimately becomes part of the political system. If it doesn't, it ceases to exist completely. You go in, you influence the system. So did it influence the system? Well, we started in 2009. By 2010, we accomplished the largest flip in congressional history since 1938. You get 2012, I think, was a bad year. National elections are bad for grassroots movements, a presidential cycle. And then you take the Senate, and then ultimately, I think this last presidential election was the Tea Party presidential election. Not that Donald Trump is a Tea Party candidate, but I think he is the leading edge of people being frustrated with the status quo in government. You look at guys who ran, you've got Marco Rubio straight out of the Tea Party movement, Rand Paul straight out of the Tea Party movement, Ted Cruz straight out of the Tea Party movement. What's happened for the American political right is it has shifted. It has essentially become the Tea Party. The rhetoric of the right is now the Tea Party rhetoric. So I think it was incredibly successful in shifting the political rhetoric of America. And I would argue that now the next step is what's the plan to fix Washington, D.C., and that's what the Convention of States project is.
Before we get to traffic and weather in your calls, Mark, what about the animosity, not only from the crazy wacko lefts on social media, but the media? It seemed as if you had folks like you coming together, making a difference, and then you had these vicious attacks that were unfair, libelous, slander, call it what you will. It was just a hit on the Tea Party. It was almost impossible for the Tea Party to do anything good.
No, I think that's true, and we were right at the center of that firestorm.
Right.
The one piece that you left out there was the attacks from the IRS.
Right.
I mean, so a lot of groups literally got disabled by the IRS. Our organization sued the IRS or spent the money to sue on behalf of all the plaintiffs. We just, by the way, beat the IRS, $3.5 million settlement with the IRS.
Cover of the New York Times.
There, yeah. So it worked out okay. So if you think things like Convention of States are impossible, we sued the IRS and won. So we can do these things.
Right.
But I think those attacks absolutely had their effect. It was really and Kevin, remember, it's just regular folks that were running these things.
Right.
So these are not like hardened political operatives. So when you see yourself slandered in the media and attacked and abused, it was pretty rough on people.
Traffic and weather together. And Kevin Miller in the morning. Mark Meckler joining us in studio here in Idaho. Let's go to the phones, and we go to Pro-Life. I wonder what you'll ask on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Pro-Life.
Well, yes. I've been a member of the Constitution Party, an officer in the Constitution Party, the Independent American Party, and I've been in the John Birch Society. And the leadership of all of those organizations, which are very far-right organizations, they say we don't need Convention of States because it'll be a runaway thing. Now, I've always tried to argue with them and say that that might not be the case. And it doesn't have to be the case if, say, a state legislature sends delegates to the Convention of States, and they tell them, listen, here's your parameters, and if one of those delegates exceeds those parameters, they're out of there. They're back home immediately. But they don't get that. And that should be, if we didn't have the 17th Amendment, state senates could send a senator to the federal Senate, and if they didn't do what they wanted to, they could bring them right back home. And it has to be that same principle. And I don't know if this Convention of States promoter right here is onto that kind of principle, but that's what I'd like to have him discuss.
All right, Pro-Life. And we're going to do that next. Mark, please stand by. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Maggie.
Good morning.
And once again, Mark Meckler joining us. To talk a little bit about the Convention of States. He'll be speaking to the folks of the Idaho legislature today. Okay, so Pro-Life had a question concerning, I guess, keeping people in line.
Yeah, his question was, he was concerned and he was suggesting that the folks who are sent to the convention, they're actually called commissioners, or you could call them delegates if you want, that are sent by your legislature, that people worry about what they'll do. Well, here's the reality. The resolution itself, passed by the legislature, says what can be talked about. Each commissioner carries with them a piece of paper called a commission that limits the authority of that commissioner, what they can or can't talk about. Here's the critical part. Your caller, Pro-Life, said they could be called home by the legislature if they don't do what they're told. That's correct, but it's also correct that if they do anything outside that commission, it's null and void. It doesn't even exist. If they voted on something they're not allowed to vote on, it's as if the vote was never cast. So those protections that Pro-Life was talking about, they are absolutely in place. Your legislature will be paying attention. They control their delegates at all times. And one last thing you said was, it'd be great if we could get rid of the 17th Amendment. I totally agree with him.
Are we looking at going back to the Articles of Confederation?
No, we're not. I mean, the articles were replaced because they weren't adequate. It wasn't a structure that worked. And so we created this federal government, this federation of states, essentially. And what we're looking at is going back to something more like the original Constitution. This is a really interesting thing that most people don't know. People have these pocket constitutions that they carry around. They're small. They're about 34 pages, roughly. They weigh about an ounce. But the Constitution that we live under now is not that original Constitution. It's what's called the Annotated Constitution. You can order it from the government printing office. It weighs over 12 pounds. The most current printing, it will be over 3,000 pages. It contains every case that the Supreme Court has ever issued ruling on the quote-unquote meaning of the Constitution. Sadly, that's the Constitution under which we live. Our goal is to go back to something closer to the original Constitution.
Okay, I don't want to hog you, sir, but so we'll get to the calls because this is a show with callers and people and that sort of thing. Let's go to Duncan in Cuna with Kevin Miller at KIDO Talk Radio and our special guest, Mark Meckler. Duncan, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. Mr. Meckler, can you speak to George Soros funding Lawrence Lessig and the Wolfpack organization? So basically, George Soros has come out with a Constitution 2020, a movement with Cass Sunstein and Obama czar heading that up, and also Eric Holder, former Obama Attorney General, heading that up, where they have vowed to destroy the Constitution using an Article 5 convention by the year 2020. So basically, through an Hegelian dialectic method, funding both sides of the issue.
Yeah, that's an interesting theory, and I appreciate it. I've been actually looking for the proof of that theory for 4 years now. I've not seen literally any evidence of that. I've heard people make that allegation. I would like to know that if it's true. What I can tell you is that every organization funded by George Soros in the United States of America has come out against this. I think there might have been, though, again, I've never seen proof of it, some initial support for Wolfpack. They are now attacking Wolfpack. You can look that up online. They're basically attacking anything that has to do with Article 5. You mentioned Eric Holder's group, which is now the National Democratic Redistricting Committee. They're working against this because they're worried about states that are controlled by Republicans passing a Convention of States application. And let me add one more thing, and this is really important. Maybe they do support the idea of an Article 5 convention. I can't find any evidence for that, but maybe they do. But just because somebody supports the use of a tool, they won't support what we're doing because they know that we can restore the original Constitution, and they hate that. And so this is the fundamental thing. You will not find a single leftist group in America, not one, and I challenge you to go out and look and send it to me if you find it, that says that they support the Convention of States project, because it doesn't do what they want to do. Certainly, they would love to rewrite the Constitution, but they know they can't do that under our application.
Duncan, thank you for the call. We go to Holly in Caldwell with Kevin Miller and our special guest Mark Meckler on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Holly.
Well, I learned a little bit more as I was listening before I got on, so I might change a little bit of what I originally called in on. I am not really in favor of an Article 5 Constitution because I just know what it's like to try to deal with the left to discuss about anything, and I think it opens up a lot of things. However, he is correct in saying that, we aren't living under the real Constitution, this annotated Constitution, and all of these court cases that many of them were made not based on constitutional decisions, in my opinion. I think that really the only way that we're going to turn this around is by replacing the federal legislators, the president, with strict constitutionalists, and ultimately replacing the judges, because they have a lot of power that is that happened in the Hage case in Nevada, where they would win, and then every time it would get sent to the Ninth Circuit and overturned, even though they proved in court many times they owned their own property. So I just think until we replace those judges with strict constitutionalists and maybe go back and try to find a way to repeal some of those court cases that were ruled upon that were not made constitutionally.
Holly, thank you for the call. Mark?
Holly, you and I agree on a lot of this stuff. I would love to see more strict constitutionalists in Washington, D.C. But let me tell you what Senator Tom Coburn, who is a strict constitutionalist, told me, what Senator Jim DeMint, another strict constitutionalist, told me. They said, you could fill the Senate with people like us, and the Senate would still abuse its power. The state or the Congress would still abuse its power because they've been given the power by all these cases that you and I don't like. And what the founders told us is if we don't like those cases, we use Article 5 to reverse them. By the way, we'd love to have you join us at the state capitol, 12:15 on the steps there. We're going to have a rally, and be great to see you there at the legislature. You and I would just say, are in agreement. The difference is, as a lawyer, I can tell you it would take us 150 years to replace the cases that you don't like. We don't have 150 years to save this country.
Mark, let's talk a little bit about the state of California and what it's become.
Do we have to?
And we have a lot of folks that have fled California. They've come here to Idaho and to some of the other states, other people leaving Oregon and Washington. But the challenge is, if you have this convention of states, if you open up Pandora's box, going back to my wacko leftist liberal argument here, I'm self-reporting.
Forgive me for saying that.
No, not at all. It's look, a valid point, sir. But, what's to prevent, what has happened in California to happening to the country if we rewrite the Constitution?
Yeah, I think that's certainly something that should be discussed. And here's the answer. Today, we are at a zenith point for Republican control of state legislatures. 33 state legislatures are controlled by Republicans. That is a super, super majority. You have more Republicans sitting in state legislatures today than any time since the Civil War. You have less Democrats by percentage in state legislatures than any time in American history. This is the moment. And so, yeah, crazy states like California will be there. I'm from California, so still, sadly. So I know how crazy it is. Our delegation is going to come in a psychedelic bus full of a bunch of hippies smoking pot. But the deal is Texas's delegation is going to be there as well, as is Idaho's, and every state gets one vote. Right now, today, Republicans and I would argue even conservatives dominate the state legislatures.
But who's to say, well, we need to give the illegals votes? I mean, we're doing that already. Again, the Constitution may not be perfect, and obviously it's, the government's out of control, but all of a sudden we just see these, people. Look, you're a lawyer. You've argued these things at the highest levels. It must drive you crazy, whether you agree with Doc or not. The president said it was unconstitutional. It's still happening.
Absolutely.
I mean, we have this whether you call it sophistry, moral relativism, has invaded the legal system.
It has, and I would expect to see states like California, New York, and Illinois make those arguments in a convention, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Because here's the deal. It takes 26 states to have anything come out of convention, right? And once it comes out of convention, this is really important. It's only a suggestion. It has no legal authority. It has no moral. It is nothing once it comes out of convention until 38 states ratify it. So you mentioned maybe they'll give illegals the vote. So here's what would have to happen to give illegals the vote. It would take 38 states ratifying it. That means if you flip that math on its head, Kevin, it takes only the 13 most conservative states and one house in their legislature to stop anything. So here's what you would have to believe if you believe that we could actually give illegals the right to vote. You have to believe that Texas and Louisiana and the Carolinas and the Dakotas and Florida and Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi, you got to believe those states, their legislatures, the most conservative legislatures in the country, are going to vote to do that. And I would just posit that's just not rational. I've been to every one of those state legislatures. If you were to suggest that in those state legislatures, I might suggest that you're packing, which you legally can do in those states.
I'm with you to a degree, but having worked in the Carolinas, Georgia, Tennessee, and Alabama, and maybe I've just been indoctrinated and marked by too much liberal propaganda, North Carolina, they were giving in-state tuition to the illegals. There's a big progressive movement in the not in South Carolina. That's totally different. But look, I digress. Let's get back to the calls. Again, we go to Tom Munz, TomMunz.com, MunzTom Twitter with Mark Meckler, and you were calling out Mark all week. I'm glad that you decided to show up on this.
I would have loved to meet him, man. He speaks way more eloquently than I ever could.
You're already handicapping yourself. All right, but here we are.
Well, I usually do. I shoot myself in the foot first and then see what happens. Mark, it's a pleasure to talk to you on the radio. Finally, I've heard a lot about you, no doubt. Tom Coburn was here last year, and he said something that was really startling to me, and you touched on it a little bit. But he told me in a meeting that he supports the convention of the states, and then made an interesting statement. He pointed to his pocket and he said, "You guys think that our Congress adheres to the Constitution in your pocket. Instead, they actually adhere to a 74-pound document." And so my question was, when I walked out of there, is, wow, they're going to try to use an Article 5 convention for our Constitution to try to rein in an out-of-control government using a completely different Constitution, which begs the question, if we're going to try to rein in an out-of-control government, this is pretty clear that the government isn't adhering to the Constitution now anyway. And so what makes you think that some special words in Article 5 or your Convention of the States is going to hold them in regards to pro-life and penalties? If the state legislature
hang on, Tom. We'll let Mark answer that. By the way, Tom did get into it with Governor Kasich when he was here in the day. So, Tom has covered this issue for quite some time.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate your commitment to being in the fight. It's not a 74-pound, it's 12 pounds, so if he said that, he was exaggerating a little. I have one on my desk. I can't carry it with me. It's too heavy to carry with me. And this question that you ask, Tom, I think it's actually the best question there is. I say that with a bit of bias because when this project was first brought to me, I asked this very question. It was my most important question. If they don't follow the Constitution now, why would they follow the Constitution if we amend it? Like, what's the magic pixie dust? And here's the answer to that question. They actually do mostly follow the Constitution. There's some notable exceptions. When I say they do, what they're required to follow by law, what they quote unquote say they're required to follow, is what the Supreme Court says the Constitution means. Those cases are all contained in the annotated Constitution, this massive 3,000 plus page document we talked about. And when Congress does something, they always justify it by saying it falls within that Constitution. And let me give you a really specific example. If you read the original Constitution, you read the Commerce Clause, it says the federal government has the power to regulate interstate commerce. And that seems really simple to most of us. Stuff that crosses state lines, the federal government has the power to regulate that. And that's what it meant originally. Today, because of Commerce Clause interpretation in that Constitution that they actually do follow, the Commerce Clause gives them the power to regulate things that aren't business. There's the Wickard v. Filburn case in the 1930s that said when a farmer grows wheat for his own consumption because he's not buying wheat on the open market, he's actually engaged in commerce. It's crazy, but that's in that annotated Constitution. By the way, that decision and the ones that followed it give the federal government the power to run the Commerce Department, the Energy Department, the Department of Education, and the EPA. And so they run all those things under the auspices of the Constitution because of what the Supreme Court has done. Largely, they follow the Constitution. It's just now the Constitution has become this mammoth, out-of-control thing because of what the Supreme Court has done to it. And the only method that the founders gave to us to fix that is Article 5. So if you don't like Obamacare, that decision is in the Constitution. If you don't like the Obergefell gay marriage decision, that's now in the annotated Constitution. If you don't like the Commerce Clause, that's now in the annotated Constitution. And Tom, I would encourage you to join us to get that stuff out of there and to fix these problems fundamentally in America.
So are you suggesting that reining in Article 5 is the only mechanism to rein in an out-of-control government? Is that what you're saying? The states don't have that authority within them anymore through nullification or, other means, like not asking for more federal money every year?
No, I love that idea, and I wish the states would not ask for more federal money every year. But Tom, wishing doesn't make it so. I would ask you, how's that working out for you? And I will tell you, having now been in 44 states around the country, it's not working out at all. That's a failed approach. It's a fantasy approach to just try to get your states. Go talk to people at the State House and ask them how many of them are willing to refuse federal funds. They're not.
And we're going to trust them as delegates?
I have, Tom, no, hold on a second. I never said anything about trusting the delegates. What I said is they are legally restrained under agency law. They are legally restrained by the commissions issued by the Idaho legislature, and they are legally restrained by the Idaho legislature having full authority to call them home if they do anything that the legislature doesn't like. So no, I wouldn't trust any of them. I don't trust anybody involved in politics ever.
All right, Tom, we got to run. More with Mark Meckler next. You're listening to Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. And we continue on. Kevin Miller in the morning, Mark Meckler joining us. So once again, the rally today.
12:15, Capitol steps at the State House. Come listen, come participate. If you want to debate, come debate. We're happy to have you.
And back to Mark Meckler here, and then we'll take your calls to the top of the hour. So, Idaho, who's on board with this?
So leading in the House, you have Tom Lurcher. We appreciate he's been on board and leading. You have Marv Hagedorn in the Senate, leading in the Senate. And again, long-term supporter, really appreciate it. Eric Redmond is another guy in the House. Whole bunch of others. So there are a lot of people that are signed up to support. There are a lot of folks on the fence, and I appreciate that. That's why we're here today, to go talk to them.
Well, we appreciate you here at KIDO Talk Radio. Let's go to Lori in Boise. Good morning.
Hello. Thank you for being there. And I hope the citizens will just contact their representatives and tell them to go for this, because last year it went down. And I think the Liberty Amendments book by Mark Levin, I don't know if you have time to comment on some of the specifics, but they include term limits. And maybe you have a minute to comment on some other suggested amendments. We're not going to get there without the Convention of States. Thanks.
All right, Lori, quickly, Mark.
Yeah, Lori, thanks. Yeah, Mark Levin, obviously a huge supporter. Sean Hannity now project. The book Liberty Amendments, that's the place to go if you really want to know the most about this. Term limits on Congress, really important. How about term limits on federal justices, including Supreme Court justices? How about forcing them to balance their budget, use generally accepted accounting principles, and limiting tax revenues? Those are things we can get done. How about stripping federal power away over education and energy and environment? It seems to me people here in Idaho know how to educate their own kids, control their own environment, deal with their own energy industry. These are things that you are able to do with the Convention of States project. I appreciate you saying call your legislators, let them know you're in support, and come out to the rally at the Capitol at the State House at 12:15. We'd love to see you there.
Dwight in Boise at KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Dwight.
Good morning. Mark, it seems to me that the liberal rank and file is in action, and too much the conservative rank and file is sitting on the sidelines complaining and feeling fearful. President Trump gets beat up every day, and we don't defend him enough. I'd like to have your comment on how we can get conservatives in action so that we won't be defeated in a con. And the other thing is, I have been told that massive jury nullifications across the country upon many bureaucracies would reduce the power of these Supreme Court decisions and make that Constitution smaller and smaller and return it back to its original size, and intent. Could you comment on both of those, please?
All right, Dwight, he'll hit that. And go ahead, please, Mark.
Sure. On jury nullification, look, I understand what you're talking about and why people would want to do that, but it ties into the other thing you said, which is there aren't enough people that are stepping up and doing what they should do. I don't think there are enough folks that'll step up in a jury box and nullify what's going on there. I think the most important thing is being involved. People need something specific to be involved in. Conventionofstates.com. Come out to the Capitol, to the State House at 12:15. Contact your legislator. Tell them to support the Convention of States project.
Mark, we appreciate it. Ray Amaya, great job. God bless and keep the faith.